So in this video, we're going to be talking about some of the basic concepts of negotiation. What I want you to do, and these are not just my thoughts, but this is based on research, and this is based on people who do negotiation for a living. But before I start, what I want to do is sort of let you know where we are. I'm sitting in my backyard, and you can look over there and you'll see the pool. And then if you go all the way around, you'll see my father-in-law, Mick. There he is. Over there, he was watching us videotape this thing. And so, just give you an idea, let you see the surroundings and know where you are. So what I want to do is give you like a series of tips that negotiators talk about and researchers talk about. And some of them apply specifically to the Model UN, like you can use them. And then some of them not so much, but they're all good to know. So one of the first things they say is be early to any meeting. You want to be prepared to work the room when you're going to participate in any kind of negotiation. And so that way, as people come into the room, you can introduce yourself and you can let them know. You can be the guy who's there. Now, when some delegates like to be very formal and they'll introduce themselves by their country name. Some people are less formal and they introduce themselves by their actual name. You can do whatever is comfortable for you. But for any of this to happen, you have to be at the conference on time. And so one of the first things you should do is figure out where your committee is going to be meeting. There's going to be an opening ceremonies. There's going to be a place where your committee is meeting. Be sure to know where your room is. Also, and this is really important, it's kind of like a big concept, but I think it's really important. You're always selling yourself, right? Negotiators always say that you're never selling a product, you're selling yourself. At Model United Nations conferences, the best way to sell yourself is by being credible, that is by being really knowledgeable about the topic, but also really interested in what other people have to say. There are some people who are going to act knowledgeable and all they want to do is dispense or inflict their knowledge on other people. You want to be the kind of person who's knowledgeable, but also is interested in what other people have to say. In order to seem like a credible source, it's really important that you have to appear confident. You have to appear confident. So if you don't trust yourself, why should anybody else trust you? That's key. So it's important to be confident. If you appear confident, if you appear knowledgeable, if you appear in seem to care about what other people have to say, it's all very compelling, right? The other thing, and this is kind of complicated, is that when you walk into a room and when the negotiations begin, one of the first things you need to do when the meeting starts, and maybe even a little bit before then, is start to identify who the good delegates are. Like in a negotiation, what you would do is you would find out who the good negotiators were and you would assess the situation. Now, newer delegates might think that you're not very good at identifying a good delegate. Actually, you know how to do this. You've been practicing with good delegates all through all of our simulations. Look for the delegates who do the kinds of things that good delegates in our simulations do. But remember that some Model United Nations programs reward delegates for being undiplomatic, or what one of our delegates has called diplomatic, right? I think she should trademark that. Some of them train their delegates to be idiots, and they're going to be the opposite of COC nice. We'll talk about that in later videos, but so you want to find the good delegates. But you want to avoid, I think, people who are just there to be mean and win awards that way. You want to try and avoid them if you can. But again, we'll talk about that more. When you find the good delegates, you just have to decide who you want to work with. You don't want to get paired up with somebody who's so strong that they're going to take over the group. But at the same time, I don't want you to surround yourself with weak delegates, right? You're there to challenge yourself. So I don't want you to find a bunch of weak delegates and make them part of your group. That's not the point. So it's a balancing act between which strong delegates and which weak delegates you work with. And so what I would recommend is talk to all our delegates, the veteran delegates, and ask them what their strategies are. You're going to have to find your own strategy, but that will help you figure out what you should do. Next, critique ideas, not people. Right? And this is true in the Model UN or elsewhere. Your criticism should always be constructive. If there are problems with a proposal, let the delegate know that you agree with their goal. You commend them for bringing this idea and this proposal to the attention of the working group, but also let them know that you're concerned about whether or not their proposal is going to achieve that goal, and ask them what they think about this change or that change or some other ways to maybe approach it. That way you started off by saying something positive, giving them, commending them for bringing something to their attention, and then you go into explaining how it can be improved. Right? That's very important. Now, if a delegate proposes something in the committee that goes beyond the jurisdiction of the committee, you should also bring that to their attention. Right? But again, do so in a way where you're not being dickish about it. Do so in a way that lets them know and lets the committee know that this is an important thing to consider, but that may not be within the mandate of the committee itself. One of the good things to do in a case like that is to bring them aside privately and say to them, you know what, actually, this committee doesn't have the authority to do that. So why don't we think about how we can accomplish the goal you're talking about within the jurisdiction of our committee? So it might be recommending to another body, right, that who does have jurisdiction, recommending to another body that they take on this idea. Another thing, I'm running out of euphemisms for next. Next, be a good listener. You know, we spent a lot of time practicing how to give speeches, but in negotiations, it's equally important to be a good listener. When delegates are speaking, give them your undivided attention. People like to be heard. Right? People like to be heard. People like feeling as though someone, and especially if you're like demonstrated you're a leader in their group, people like being heard, and especially by somebody who's a leader. So if you have a notepad, right, and you're like writing down their ideas, that's even better. One way of demonstrating that you're listening is to ask some questions about something a delegate has said. Ask them to clarify, right? That's a way that you can easily communicate to them that you're listening, that you're paying attention, right? Also, this information can be used later on in negotiations. Next, and we've talked about this all through the semester, give credit where credit is due, right? When delegates make a good proposal, give them credit. Do it privately, do it publicly, right? When you speak to the committee, give delegates credit for their cooperation, for their willingness to work in the spirit of cooperation, their contributions. You've heard me say this a bunch of times. You'll hear it many times afterwards. Leadership is not about taking credit. Leadership is about giving credit. Make sure that you're doing the kinds of things that leaders do. If you've established yourself as a leader, delegates are going to really care about the fact that you've identified them. There you are as the leader of their working group and saying, thank you to whatever country for your ideas dealing with education. That's important. Respect the confidentiality of others. Don't eavesdrop, right? Don't pass along private information. Don't gossip. Don't engage in personal attacks, even when you're not in committee. Don't tell people like, hey, I'm going to tell you something, but don't tell anybody else, because everybody is going to talk to somebody else, right? And it's actually putting a burden on them. If other delegates engage in that behavior and it pisses you off, don't go off on them. Don't do it in committee and don't do it outside of committee, right? If you're really frustrated, pull aside the head delegate or pull me aside and use that to blow off some steam, right? We understand that that this is part of what happens in committees. So you come and you say, I can't believe this delegate did this and they're being such idiots and blah, 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 and get it all out of your system. You can tell me, you can tell the head delegate, and we'll sit there and we'll listen without judgment. And then hopefully what will happen is you'll be like, oh, I need to get that out of my system. and then you go back to work using the strategies that you'd employed and what you've been planning to do all along. Never allow the poor behavior of another delegate to give you an excuse to lower your standards. Keep yourself to a higher standard. COC Nice is a strategy, but it's also a principle, right? It's a principle about how you conduct yourself. And you should stick with that principle. You should believe in that principle. It actually works. Now, here's an important caveat to all this. If you hear anything that suggests that another delegate is in some way in jeopardy, there's something wrong with their physical or emotional well-being, you have to come to me and you have to talk about it. That's not gossip. I will do what I need to do to ensure that the delegate, whether it's on COC's team or another team, is safe. So don't keep those kinds of things to yourself, and err on the side of caution. That's really important. Conferences can be really emotional and challenging things, and if people have other things going on in their life, it can build. So you just need to make sure that while I don't want you to gossip, I don't want you to do any of that kind of stuff, I do want you to come to me if you hear something that's concerning to you. Moving on. As we discussed in the video on authors panels, building a coalition of delegates can be important to advancing the interests of your country. So you should always be thinking about pulling people in. There is strength in numbers. Now, what we talked about in the other video is this can also be helpful if a delegate tries to kick you off the authors panel. But as a general rule, since we're there to compromise, since we're there to come up with proposals and bring people together and move the committee forward, always be thinking about drawing people in. If you find yourself just working with a couple of delegates and not larger groups, you want to pull people into what it is you're doing.